Hello and welcome to TransAlta and our week-long celebration of International Women's Day. My name is Noren Howg and I am legal counsel at TransAlta. Joining me is Marcia Perry, our Managing Director of People and Talent. As part of our commitment to reconciliation and decolonization, I wanted to begin by acknowledging that TransAlta is located on the traditional territories of the Niitsitapi and the people of the Treaty 7 region. It is also the home of the Métis Region 3. Here with me today is our executives, Kerry Wilks, our EVP of Legal, External Affairs and Commercial, and Jane Fedoretz, EVP of People, Talent and Transformation. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us in our celebration of International Women's Day for 2021. So let's get started. I'll kick it off. Why are initiatives like International Women's Day important to us as a company at TransAlta? Jane.
Thanks, Larry. That's a great question. I think it's a great opportunity for us to celebrate the achievements of women and really make that a clear and compelling discussion and story. And it's also an opportunity to take a step back and think about ways that we can work towards improvement for women and get women more involved in the renewables and energy business. So it's a great opportunity for us to celebrate and take a step back and think about the future.
Thank you.
And I think just pivoting from Jane's word of celebrating and acknowledging all of the achievements. I mean, we're sitting in the province with the famous 4 women who made such a critical difference in the lives of every woman, including all of the women that are with TransAlta. And I think by having a day such as International Women's Day, it forces people to actively focus on women, where we're going, where we've been, and how we can move gender equality forward faster. So I think it's a celebration, but it's also a great opportunity to bring awareness consciously across the organization.
Thank you.
So Kerry, this year's International Women's Day theme is Choose to Challenge. How are you challenging yourself and your team and TransAlta?
So challenge is a big word that I think, Marcia, can encompass so many things. And I think for me, as an executive woman, as a mom, I really try to challenge myself and my community around me to be aware of unconscious biasness. So, it's often the case that people won't necessarily think that there are imbalances in gender in the workplace or elsewhere in positions of authority. But if you challenge yourself to test yourself as to whether you have any unconscious biasness towards whether it's a woman or a man in any kind of position, I think that you might find yourself surprised with some of the outcomes. And so I'm constantly challenging myself to actively, as opposed to passively, have an awareness of what my biases are, no matter how deep they may be. And I think it's so important for us to challenge everyone around us in the same regard.
Thank you. And how about challenging your community?
I think it's the same thing. When people in the community gravitate towards causes for them, I think that sometimes if you look at the statistics, you'll find that there may be more of a gravitation towards causes that aren't necessarily riddled with systemic poverty. And I think if you go down that road and then you look at the statistics of systemic poverty, you will find that the greater percentage in that zone are women that may be homeless with children, very challenging circumstances. And I think that it's very important, and it's on each of us to ensure that we raise the awareness with respect to that as well, and that we give back to the community that we exist in. We don't just continue to exist in it.
Great, thank you.
And Jane, what do you think some of the challenges that women face in corporate Canada, and how can we go about addressing some of these?
Mary, that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. I think there is, notwithstanding we've made a lot of progress relative to becoming more aware and trying to level the playing field for women, I still don't think it's equal. And I think there is some of the bias that exists is very much sort of behind the scenes bias, but it still exists. And so I think it's a challenge for women to figure out whatever profession they're in, really learning about the profession and then finding a way to be brave and courageous to tell your story and stand up for injustice if and when it happens, and really trying to move forward with a consistent message that this should not be accepted in corporate Canada. It's still there, and I think that's, notwithstanding, I've been practicing law for 20 years now. I still see it in my profession, and in a way, I've been very thankful for all the moves that have been made, but I still think there's a lot of work yet to do. So it's building relationships, having courage to tell your story, being curious about why the bias exists. I think we have to ask some of those, fundamental questions about why is this happening and it's not okay. And then finding peers and like-minded women and men that will support you so you're not alone, because being in a corporate environment can be very lonely. And so I think you need to find people that will support you and support what you stand for and believe in.
And maybe I can just pivot on that, Jamie. You would know this for sure because your background is a lawyer. But a number of years ago, we were behind the US, for example, when we were in-house lawyers and we would engage with law firms. And we would raise the topic with economic downturns. Maybe, we would consider alternative fee arrangements, and it was very taboo. It was, very much so with law firms, how can you raise that question with me? We work, these are the fees that we deserve. And now it's totally normal.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me think about that when I saw recently the General Counsel of Coca-Cola in the US issued a mandate that said, these are the requirements we have for diversity within our company. Mm-hmm. As a service provider, we expect you meet those same demographics, and to the extent you don't, whatever percentage you're off, you're going to deduct that off our bill. Wow. And when I read it, I thought, that's amazing. But then I started to think, why aren't we starting down that path as well? Yeah. And I thought back to when, the whole conversation around fee structures was so, and now that's our norm. Why wouldn't we? And I think it's, talking about corporations, exactly what you were saying. Why is that acceptable in corporate Canada? No, I think that those kinds of arrangements should be the norm, and people shouldn't be surprised if we're requiring that of ourselves. That's right. Then everyone that is getting any kind of economic benefit from us should have that reflected in their own requirements.
Agreed.
What are some of your mindsets to overcome some of the challenges that we faced as a company and that we faced individually through these times?
Thanks. I think it's so, COVID has what I would say layers upon layers of sort of health issues, science, mental health, families, work environment, flexible work. And so it's a multi-layered issue that I think we have to understand what the science says so we can get grounded in the context of what this disease really is and how we can manage through it. And I think we've done that. We've certainly done that at the company, where we've used the resources of specialists to come in and talk to us about the science of COVID. But I think it's also because this is such a long process, and I think people thought 2021 were golden. It's all over, and hindsight's 2020, and we can look forward, and it's not a problem. I think there has to be an intentionality around this is for the long haul, and I need to accept where I'm at, and because there's you can build a lot of anxiety around going, oh my God, I just want to go on a holiday. Oh my God, I need to get back to the office. Oh my God. So it's really thinking and accepting, it's accepting where we're at, so you can build some calmness and less anxiety. And it's being intentional about moving forward and just getting to the other side of it. And so, I mean, isn't that the way we all should be in every aspect of our life? You know, when you're thinking about being in university or your job or whatever context, where you are being intentional about moving forward and focusing on the end goal and going through the process to get to the end goal successfully. And I think that's what my mindset has had to be. There were times when I would sit at home and go, you know, be looking on the website, well, how do I get to the Caribbean for a vacation? Oh, this will never happen. And then I just thought, you know, this is a waste of energy. And I think we have to refocus and say, this is what it is. And we need to move forward. We need to be intentional about what we're going to do. And we're going to get through it successfully. And that's what I think we've done as a company, is really been intentional with our employees to say, I know it's hard and it sucks. And this is unfair, but we need to move through this together as a team in order to be able to see the other side. So we all can go to the Caribbean.
Right.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And it reminds me of our zip training too, like what you just said, right? Like, what's our 50%? What's within our control, and how do we focus in on what is within our control, and then use that to sort of help us through that process that you're talking about. So I definitely feel that we as a company have definitely been thinking through that mindset and through your leadership. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. I think that the piece is that when you take the locus of control back and you focus on the end state, I think you would be surprised how much resiliency you actually obtain in your life, which has been a huge piece of how I got here, is just being resilient and persevering through all of the hardships that you go through in order to get to the other side. And that's a compelling story to be able to hold on to and say, we did it, you know? Not through whining and complaining and being sad, although it's true, but by truly focusing on what's important and how to get through it.
I think I found a new meditation coach, Jane.
But I do think that's a great point, Jane, and just remembering that everybody is in the same boat, I think has also helped all of us as we think about that as well. We're not just doing it for ourselves, but for everybody else. So I think that's great.
Correct, absolutely correct.
Good. I'm going to ask this question of both of you. So I'd like you to think back on your career, do a little reflection, and tell me what you did in your career to help you get to the position you're in today. I'll start with you, Jane.
I think for me, it was a drive to be something more. And at the time, I didn't know what something more was when I went to college for the first time. It was really just to be more than a farm kid that, you know, whose parents went to university, but I was fooling around by grade 12, and there was no chance that I would ever get to university. So it was really just hugely focused on moving forward. Again, we just talked about this, and being focused on the end goal, which at the time, I thought I would be in the professoriate and really become a university professor in social work and psychology. And then just taking little chunks and moving forward. So hard work and perseverance, that's really a large part of my story to get here.
Absolutely. Thank you. Kerry.
So I think very much the same. I grew up in a very small fishing village, and you know, my parents were always very much drilling into me, just do your best, no matter what, do your best. And so there was an innate fire almost, but there was also an innate sense of being oblivious to any difference between me and someone who grew up very differently than I did, that perhaps has two judges as parents, you know, and grew up in the middle of Toronto, for example. I was completely oblivious to all of those differences, and I just focused on where I wanted to get and made a game plan and didn't wait to start until tomorrow, and kind of pushed my way through. And I think what really was a big part of that motivation is I just didn't want any regrets. So I just did it as hard and best to the greatest standard I could. And if it didn't turn out how I wanted it to turn out, then I wouldn't have any regrets about it because I knew I tried my hardest.
So tell us a little bit about who you were as university students, what you did, how you spent your time, what you were reading, who are your influencers? Kerry and Jane, I'll open it up to both of you.
I don't think there were influencers. I don't think that existed.
No.
Maybe like my family, I don't know. I mean, in terms of what I was reading, by that point when I got to university, I was on a mission to get into law school and be successful because I could hear my dad saying to me, I'm not paying for C minuses. So I knew I had to do better and, you know, make something of my time there. You know, I think really, this is going to sound a little bit corny, but it is absolutely authentic, that I thought a lot about my maternal grandmother. She raised 18 kids on her own. My pop passed away very young. She was, you know, my other nan was a businesswoman. They were incredibly successful, and they were my influencers, right? I wanted to make them proud because they worked so hard to pave the way, as did my parents, my dad included. But you know, I think that's basically it. And growing up in a small town Newfoundland, I was done with the partying by the time I went to university. So there's nothing exciting there, but I really think that's my story. I'm sure I had 500 self-help books on a bookshelf that I wasted money on and never read. But that's about it. What about you, Jane?
I went to school right out of high school to take early childhood development, and then I worked in that space for about 8 years. And so I had a scholarship, and you know, my parents didn't have a lot of money, so they gave me what they could. So I was really self-sufficient on that point. I went back to university at 27 and then went into a Bachelor of Social Work program and was heading towards a PhD, and then pivoted and went to law school. So I funded all of that on my own at that point.
So my next question is for Kerry. Kerry, tell me about some of the biggest challenges you had in your career.
The biggest challenges, well, you know, first I think would be, I don't think I have any Newfoundland accent right now, despite what people say, but I had a very strong Newfoundland accent when I first left Newfoundland when I did my undergrad in Halifax. And I think this has a broader depth to it, this story, that there'll be a lot of people that can relate to it in very different ways than what I necessarily experienced. But there was an assumption that my accent equated with lack of knowledge, unsophistication. And so I would consciously articulate in different ways. And even to this day sometimes, my daughter will say to me, how come you change your voice when you're on the phone sometimes? But when you yell at us, we can barely understand you. So I think that is a specific example, but it goes broader into what you define as insecurities inside yourself for whatever reason, because of whatever your story is, where you've come from, whatever your past experiences have been. And I think that probably is one of the biggest challenges that people have to overcome, is that belief in their own resilience. And they can get past that and discover what their true potential is.
Yes, thank you, I agree.
And so Jane, what drives you every day? You know, what keeps you going in tough times and in good times? What is your gas?
That's a great question. I think it would be the desire to influence change. That is constantly at the top of my mind. How do I evolve personally? How do I allow others to be all that they can be? How do I ensure that people belong and bring their authentic selves to work, because that's important for me. And that really has always been a focus for me. I mean, that is what gets me up in the morning and goes, let's go back out there and let's go see what else I can do. And I think that will always be the way that I'll always respond in a work environment, just personally, right? It's about the evolution of self.
I think that's a good question for you guys too. What about you, Marcia?
What drives me, if I look back, it's probably just my sheer stubbornness, really. If I do this, I will accomplish this, and really setting my mind to specific tasks. So I think in a lot of situations, it is definitely stubbornness. But now as I get a little older, as I have a 9-year-old daughter, it's also showing her what I can do. So, you know, my stubbornness for myself personally, but also my stubbornness for her. And so she could see what we could accomplish.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think I would echo that. Like, I think having not a 9-year-old daughter, but 2.5-year-old daughter, I think about who I want her to be. And really for her to get there means that she has to see it in me. And so, you know, I really feel that, you know, what we expect of our future generations, multiple generations, we start to have to be able to pave the path for them today. And that kind of goes back to your comments, Kerry, of being inspired by the famous four here in Alberta and sort of remembering them. And I also think it comes back to just sort of our sense of when we truly feel this place is ours, when we have a place to be here and we're confident in that and we know why we're here, we can accomplish many things together. And I think that's something that, you know, truly drives me in that sense as well, is the idea to kind of come together, collaborate, have synergy, and have this opportunity to influence in a collective way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent.
And so the last question that we would like to ask you is really for our audience. In closing, you know, our audience is MRU students and alumni, recent alumni from MRU. So what a piece of advice that you'd give them that are listening to our fireside chat here on International Women's Day?
You know, I think my biggest piece of advice would be get outside the box. If you want to go on a path and whatever it is that you define as success, you have to get outside the box, think creatively, push yourself. Don't wait for somebody else to come behind you and give you a start. That you have to define that for yourself, and it has to be without boundaries. And in order to do that, you have to be brave.
Yeah, just building off what Kerry said, she's absolutely correct in terms of being brave. And to that end, it's also, as you're out there being brave and courageous, to trust yourself, because there will be doubters that come your way and say, what are you doing that for? And also not to be overly hard on yourself, because I think as you're moving through a professional career and you're trying to get established and you maybe have had a few knocks along the way, whatever the circumstances are, is to say, you know, not everything's going to work out, but there's learning in each of those pieces that you have that come your way, good or bad, that you can put into your toolkit and use to go forward. And so not being hard on yourself is really hard, which is particularly difficult for many women. They can sit back and sort of go, I should have done this, and that was wrong. Just get up, dust yourself off, and keep moving forward.
Thank you. So I think we'll close here, and we wanted to thank both of you for giving us your time, and for MRU for this opportunity to be able to collaborate for International Women's Day, and we look forward to future collaborations.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Well, happy International Women's Day.
Happy
everyone.
International Women's Day.
Yes.
Thank you.
WD.